Welcome.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know if you remember, but way back when everything came out with everything that was happening in your past, I sent you my cookbook because I just wanted to give you something.
Yes, no, I was actually going to say that's how you and I first met. And I
Yeah.
remember getting it with a really beautiful note inside because, as you know, anytime you tell your story, whether it's to one person or to a million people, it's deeply personal and you feel very vulnerable and fragile. And I certainly did during that time. And getting your note, I just remember feeling not alone and like there was a
Oh,
community around me. So
well,
thank you.
thanks. Well, you can thank my agent because she found your address.
She's good. And now you have another book out called Know
Yes.
Your Endo, which
Yes.
I was privy to reading a copy, and I couldn't put it down last night. That
Oh,
was my nightly reading after my son went to sleep, and I kept going. Oh my gosh, all of this is just it's just hitting home. It just feels like my story, and obviously, so many other people can relate to it. What was your incentive for this book?
well, I mean, I think after writing my first book, which was a cookbook, I I almost feel regret this now, but when I wrote my cookbook, I really didn't want it to be an endo book because I didn't want to be pegged as this is the endo girl. All she does is talk about endo. But I still wanted to include a little tiny part about endo in the cookbook because I mean, that's the whole reason why I wrote it. It's because food helped me really transform my life. And after writing that cookbook, the amount of people that messaged me that said, I have endo, the fact that you mentioned it, I feel seen for the first time. Or people that got a diagnosis because of my cookbook, which just was like, why did that happen? I just thought I don't want to write any more cookbooks. I want to write the endo book that maybe I should have written in the first place because it felt wrong that so many people were getting helped through a book about like gluten-free cookies.
Which are also very good too. So,
Thank you.
I mean, you need to have some good cookies in your life.
Right.
But this, reading it, you really break it down with like a toolkit and how to approach it. Because I think for many of us, the average is like 10 years, right? Before we
Mhm.
actually get a diagnosis. Some people I wouldn't even say the word is fortunate because you're just not fortunate to have endo
Yeah.
in any capacity, but sometimes you get a diagnosis earlier. But during that 10 years, it's like, okay, you get that diagnosis, you have endometriosis, but I immediately went to Google and I'm looking for, okay, but what does that mean? I'm seeing the definition, which is not always accurate on the web, but I'm seeing this and I don't know how to cope because it's a
Mhm.
chronic illness. It's autoimmune, it's inflammatory. So, how do I live now with this disease? Because there is no cure, there's very minimal treatment. And
Yeah.
that was really wise, I think, for you to figure out a tool set. How did you come about that?
Well, I was actually very against everything that I recommend in the book. I was not interested in eating well. I was not interested in moving my body. I was not interested in stress management, but I was in the darkest place you can imagine. And as you read in the beginning of the book, not wanting to be alive anymore most days. And so, so much of this book is the tools that I learned, but it was a friend of mine that knew that I was in this very dark place. And I think, as you know, with Endo, we are very good at hiding our pain and struggles. So none of my friends knew what pain I was in, but she actually came to stay with me for a weekend and she witnessed it. And when she went back home to LA, she started researching for me on my behalf. And and this is 10 years ago, right? So there wasn't a lot of information out
Mhm.
there. She sent me a link about how food could help inflammation and endo. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This is dumb. I'm gonna probably get a hysterectomy anyway. But I will try it because my friend sent it to me. And within a few weeks, I noticed that, oh my gosh, I can kind of get out of bed better. And after a few months, I was able to start moving my body. I wanted to move my body, exercise. And then I just started to feel a little bit happier. And again, like I mentioned this, as you know, in the book 100 times, these are not a cure. These are not treatments for endo, But for me, it helped my pain become manageable.
Mhm.
So, after a while, I had to just suck it up and say, this is actually working. And you actually can't eat pizza and candy every day. Like, you need to learn how to cook. You need to eat
Donut diet
vegetables.
is a no-go.
And you have to learn that maybe you can't run a marathon, but maybe you can be really good at foam rolling. Maybe you can be really good at jumping on a trampoline. And so those tools saved my life. And I just really wanted to help other people have, I always say in the book, have more good days than bad, because I can't promise you're going to have the most perfect life after you use these tools, but you could have a little bit more of your life back.
Right. Well, their management. There's
Yeah.
some management there. And I think when everything feels chaotic, and especially when you touch upon in the book too, that pain can alter your personality. Can you elaborate on that? Because I
Yeah.
get really grumpy when I'm in pain. When my pain
Yeah.
gets to a 10 plus, I'm just irritable, anxious. Everything seems overwhelming.
Well, yeah. And there's a lot of research that I included in the book that there's studies that show people that have chronic illnesses. I mean, it can impact how you approach each day. It can impact your happiness and how your relationships. I share a story in the book where my sister and I didn't get along for the majority of our life until we both started managing our endometriosis. And all of a sudden, we got along a little bit better. She wasn't as snippy, I wasn't as pokey. And I think, one of the therapists that I interview in the book, she's like, imagine walking around every single day of your life with an acute broken arm. How could you not be a little bit in a bad mood? you know
Mhm.
so I think people with endo are really good, like I said, with presenting what people want to see us as happy, as having it together. But sometimes that means snapping at the person at the grocery store, not even meaning to. You're just in pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's almost like your nerve endings are on high alert. You're super,
Yeah.
super, and I'm not saying sensitive in a bad way, but it's like we're just so in tune with our bodies.
Hmm.
And it's, you say like name your stress, right? In the book.
Hmm.
Why do you think that's a good tool?
Yeah. So in the stress management chapter, I really want people to own the fact that maybe their endo is stressing them out. Because I think, again, we get really, because our friends and family are very cool with us complaining about men, money, career, jobs. But a lot of times when we start to share about our pain or our chronic symptoms, people kind of maybe tune us out a little bit. There's people might be like, I don't want to hear about your period. I think it's so important for us to voice that to people in our lives that, hey, look, this is what's happening with me. This
Mhm.
is why I might be acting this way today. I mean, with my husband now, like there's so many times where I might snap and then a minute later come by and say, you know what's happening, right? He's like, yeah, you're having a bad pain day. And it's like, okay, I'm glad we're on the same page.
And that's another thing too with like interpersonal dynamics and relationships, because a lot of people with endo are kind of in that, they're dating, they're in relationships, they might be in marriages, and there's a lot of pressures, right? With all of that, there's sex involved, all of it.
Mhm.
There's always demands in relationships, and if you are partnered with somebody who does not have empathy
Mm.
or tolerance, it's a bad match because
Yeah.
those types of personalities for somebody who's going through a chronic illness, whether it's endo or anything similar, it's going to be very difficult to find support, and you're going to feel more isolated. And I think that's another difficult thing. So if you're with somebody who doesn't want to hear it, and
Mm.
you don't have an outlet anywhere else, you don't have a trusted confidant, you just have that one person and they don't want to hear it, that's minimizing your pain, that's silencing you, that's letting you struggle alone, that can only compound internal pain, but that also comes out physically too, because their whole body's constantly tense. So I think, with chronic illness, it's just very complex and it does infiltrate all aspects of your life.
Absolutely. And I think that was so important to me with this book is not just to share, this is what endo is, these are the foods to eat, but like actually show the research of how it can impact your career, how it can impact your self-worth, how it can impact your relationships, because your doctor's not telling you this. Like your doctor's not saying you have endo, now look out for your mental health. They're just giving you a sheet of paper with, come back for an ultrasound.
There is a lot in our society too, and I encountered this in a previous workplace where, everybody was super supportive. At least I thought so to my face about it, because I had
Mhm.
to miss work. I had to have excision surgery. I had to recuperate, even though it was like 10 days. And I had this feeling I had to go back, even though I was limping from pain.
Yeah.
It's like, I have to go back and I have to show everyone I'm okay. But people were definitely like, so you
Right.
have to miss for a post-op appointment? Okay.
Right.
And it wasn't something where people could really quite understand that endo is a real disease, because like you said, that it's an invisible illness, so people don't see something wrong with you. They don't see a broken arm, so it's
Right.
harder for people to connect with, this person is unwell, they're sick, when they can't see something wrong. People also can say, oh, they have cancer, and there's more sensitivity to that, but with endo, it's like, well, you look okay, so I don't
Right.
get it.
Absolutely. And is this going to happen to you every month when you get your period?
Mm,
Like people just get pissed off too. I mean, I think that's one of the questions that I asked a partner in the book about how he supports his wife, is just how does that look long term for you? Because this is not something that's like the flu that's going to go away in a couple of weeks, or with cancer, you can hopefully be in remission. This is something that is a lifelong thing that you need to manage.
I had a close friend of mine who has a autoimmune disease, and she was, dating, single, dating, going on a couple dates, and she told a guy on the third date that she started to like, that she had this chronic illness. And he said to her, hey, listen, like, I'm just not in for it. Like, we could date a couple more months, but I'm not going to look at you seriously, because I'm not going to put up with it.
Wow.
And that was one date. And then it happened to her again with another date. And she said, I'm trying to be open and honest and tell them my
Mhm.
reality, and I'm getting dumped left and right. And, as a friend, it's like I wanted to tell her, screw those guys, and
Right.
you're stronger and better. But she was in so much pain for that reaction, and rightfully so. And there wasn't something I could tell her to comfort her in that second.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the last thing you wanna hear is like, "Well, there's good guys out there," or like, "Stop looking and you'll find them." It's like, "Okay." Like, just let me like yeah, and it's like you don't also want to trick someone into falling in love with you, and then here's the big reveal. It's just it is good to be open and honest, and I think sometimes it shows people's true colors.
Yeah, and also going back to just like any kind of chronic illness like endo, there's a strength that you get, and you talk about that in your book, because one woman wrote, I have so much more strength, and endo made me who I am. And
Mhm.
I think that has to be highlighted too. It's all not doom and gloom. Like, things happen in
Yes.
our lives, and there's a reason for things. And I can look back and point to, if I didn't have this disease, I probably would have never had my son. It's just
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
there's meaning behind things if you look for it.
Yeah, and I think where that gets tricky sometimes in the endo space is that when you are truly in the darkest place suffering, the last thing you want to see is like a pink posy quote on Instagram. You want to see someone that is pissed off as you are. But I think we do need that balance. We do need some type of balance. And I think that's why I wanted the word hope to be in the subtitle of my book, is that there is ounces of hope, even if you're in a very dark place right now.
Yeah. No, I think that I always say, like, the darkness in the tunnel, you have to see some light.
Yeah.
And there has to be a bit of that. And I do know that, and I've talked about it a little bit previously, and you've talked about it on your Instagram and social media, that there's a lot of toxicity sometimes in the endo community. And I think
Yeah.
it's just unchecked pain that's being channeled into the wrong places, towards the wrong people.
Mhm.
Um, what has been your experience? Why do you think that's happening? Because we really need each other.
Yeah, I mean, It's really tricky because I definitely have had people go at me in the DMs for aligning myself with certain organizations or doctors or and I don't know. I think that there's a lot of information out there, what people think they know. I don't know that sometimes they know the full story.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of just like high school, there's some gossip, there's some things that aren't always true. And I do think, like you said, I mean, I think a lot of people are hurting. And I think, especially right now, with people stuck inside, some people's elective surgeries canceled, that there's a lot of people hurting. And I also think that because there has been such a history of misinformation with endo, I think that people, I think to their credit, and then sometimes it can get a little bit mean. I think that people really want to make sure the most accurate information is out there. And
Mhm.
sometimes they go about it in a way that might be hurtful.
Right.
So I think sometimes it's well intentioned, it's just maybe not executed in the
Right.
best way.
Right. And I think too, when I know for myself, it was when I got sick the f- the first time I ever had like what was leading me to an ER over it, and it took me a year to be strong enough to come out with my story.
Yeah.
And I got mixed responses, but I got really attacked by one group, and it was hard, and it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with a video that was embedded in an essay that I had no control over, and I
Mhm.
was just getting destroyed on social for, this archaic video, and I'm like, I had nothing to do with it. It was an
Right.
editor choice, and it was hard, but in that moment too, I remember crying that night and going like, I just wanted to help. I
Yeah.
just wanted to tell my story and help, and now I feel like people are so upset with me and I did some sort of disservice. And um I think we all just have to be a little bit kinder, and it's easier to say in a general sense, but I think having emotional reactions quickly is not always the best thing.
Yeah, I mean, for an example, yesterday I actually saw someone that had a very well-meaning post. She has a huge following, talk about what endometriosis was, and she got a little bit of the language incorrect.
Mhm.
So I just DM'd her and I said, "Hey, just as a heads up, this is the language, and I just wanted to let you know because if you don't change it, some people might come at you." As opposed to just me hitting her in the comments saying, "This is wrong. Why did you do this?" It's like, well, she's trying to help. She just might not know.
Right.
So I think that we can approach people maybe one on one versus just kind of going at them publicly
Yeah.
sometimes too.
I think that's a really good lesson, because even though someone's posting something publicly, you don't have to put them out.
Publicly go after them.
Yeah, you can just send a quick message, or if they're not responding to it, just write in the comment like, "Hey, I DM'd you something. Please take
Right.
a look," or whatever, so that, because what it does is it causes voices that might be prominent and trying to do good for the community. It causes a retreat.
For
And
sure.
so why do I want to put myself out there if every time I do, and if I use, the wrong comma, so to speak,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get destroyed for it. So it makes those people retreat, and we need the loud voices. But of course, we need the loud voices with accurate information. But again, like, there's a difference between doctors and advocates and those trying to push for awareness. And all of us can always learn and be better, but there's a gentleness in the approach.
Yeah, and that's why I try to, I mean, talk about being nervous about getting destroyed. It's like when you put out a 70,000 word book about endo, you just are like, and that's why it was so important to include so many doctors and experts in my book. It's like, I don't have all the answers, but let's bring together all these people that do.
With everything that you previously knew about endo, what surprised you? And I'm sure there was more than one thing, but what was one thing that really surprised you about the disease that you didn't know in any aspect?
I would say the career stuff.
Mm.
The career research blew my mind, and just how much people's career paths are altered because of endo. I mean,
Mhm.
firsthand in a different way what that was like. Um, it made me have a couple nights where I went to bed crying because I just, it was very shocking to me. And I think that as someone that has had the opportunity to be a writer and have my own business, I had, always done my best to kind of push through, but I also, I was in charge. So I could come in late if I needed to. So I think the career impact was huge, but then I also tried to do a good job with the book and sharing different types of careers too. Like I interviewed a truck driver for the book. I interviewed a newscaster for the book. So, it's not just someone that works a 9 to 5. I mean, there's all of these different people with endo that have very, very different careers. And how do you navigate that with
Mhm.
endometriosis?
Yeah, and even parenting with
Oh
endometriosis.
my gosh, yes, which there's no good answer for that. I just tried to share positive stories and maybe some solutions because I think, there's a lot of single parents with endo that don't have exactly it, don't have the support of a spouse or don't live in a city where their parents live to get extra help. So, sometimes you're on solo parent duty. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, yeah, and it's also one of those things too, if you're in a really bad pain situation
Hmm.
and you're like, okay, I, depending upon what you do, but some people take pain pills that are, stronger if you're in a really bad situation. But if you're with a small child, you're not going
You
to take
can't do
that.
that. I know.
So it's like you just take that feeding pad and you're like, come on, ibuprofen, do your
I
thing.
know. I know my husband before pandemic, he traveled a lot and my son and I, we have this thing where whenever it's the first 2 days of my period, it's show day because he doesn't really get to watch a lot of shows. A little bit strict with TV. And so on those first 2 days, it's show day. And so, I mean, he's 6 now, but this month he came home and he was like, "Did you start your period?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Show day." So we laid in bed together and watched some shows. And it's kind of, A, I like that periods are normal to a
Mhm.
6-year-old boy. And B, it's sort of like, we're not celebrating that I had a period, but we're kind of managing it together.
Right.
It's not something that's, oh my gosh, mom is sick again. It's like, oh, we get to watch shows together in bed. So
Yeah.
I try to make him involved to, not to put burden on him, but to make him aware of what's happening.
Good parenting score there. I'm taking notes. That's good. And just to leave on a high note, you talk about celebrating your wins.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
love that. Can you give advice on how we can celebrate our wins?
Yeah. So, I mean, celebrating my wins is something that is important to me aside from endo too. And I open up the book with, I actually had a celebrate your wins party with my friends where everyone had to come in, write down something that they were proud of and put it up on the wall. And I think with endo, it's so crucial to celebrate your wins with endo. And for me, it can be, going to pick up my son from school on the first day of my period. It could be actually cooking a dinner on the first day of my period. It could be feeling empowered to say no to my doctor about him suggesting something that I don't want to do for my body. So there can be little wins, there can be big wins, but I think that we have to recognize the things that we can accomplish because on a day to day, there can be a lot of things that we feel like we can't accomplish.
Mhm. No, I
What's
love
one of your wins today or
that.
this week?
Day. Oh, I don't know. Is that terrible? Uh, Probably some work stuff.
Some work stuff? Okay.
Yeah, some work accomplishments.
Okay. Well, your win to me is just looking so gorge right now.
Thank you, and right back at you. I never feel that way, but thank you. I always feel like the frazzled mom, kind of, you know.
I get it.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you for being here today,
Oh
and
my gosh, thank
I
you.
thoroughly enjoyed reading your book. It made me super happy to read it. And there was a lot of good takeaways.
Oh,
And
I'm
one of
so
the things
glad.
I'm going to do is celebrate a win every day, just so there's a little bit more positivity in my life. And I hope everyone watching does the same.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you soon.